World at War's Verruckt was one of the most frightening maps in Call of Duty Zombies history, and to this day is known for the fear induced in players. Verruckt was the second Zombies map ever released and was featured in DLC 1, making Zombies go from a hidden secret to a full-fledged game mode. The map's innovation was essential to the core mode itself and is still seen today with systems that make Call of Duty Zombies distinct from other titles. With Nocturne Totem being a large success for Treyarch Studios, it only made sense to make another attempt at the Zombies genre, but this time in an abandoned asylum rather than an airfield. The map featured many more gameplay elements, and this was noticed immediately after players loading in, as players could notice that they were not guaranteed to spawn, and rather could spawn in one of two different rooms, each featuring one perk machine and two wall weapons. With wall weapons returning, players felt a sense of comfort knowing that they understood at least the bare minimum of the map, but in bold colors, a player could see a brand new perk machine that would grant players special abilities for a set price. These perks were named Quick Revive, Juggernog, Speed Cola, and Double Tap Root Beer. The abilities these drinks granted were mechanics such as reviving players twice as fast, being able to recover health within half a second, or doubling reload speed alongside doubled weapon fire rate. These perks could be purchased only after players turned on the power. Power was a new system in Zombies given to players and made to reach a goal, which was noticeable in every map it featured in the future. Once players turned on the power, they would quickly realize that Verruckt was far more dangerous than Nocturne Totem. While the original map had introduced players to the basic concept of surviving endless waves of zombies, Verruckt was designed to challenge everything players thought they knew about the mode. One of the first things players noticed was the speed of the zombies. Compared to Nocturne Totem, the Undead in Verruckt moved much faster and attacked with a level of aggression that many players were simply not prepared for. This immediately created a feeling of panic. The map was no longer about casually boarding windows and holding position. Instead, players were constantly under pressure and forced to think about where they were moving at all times. The layout of the map only amplified this feeling. The asylum was made up of narrow hallways, small rooms, and tight choke points that left very little room for error. Every door a player opened felt like a risk because it could expose them to new angle of attack, unlike later maps that would provide large training areas for people to run around in circles for the zombies. Verruckt felt claustrophobic. The walls seemed to close in around the player and every section of the map felt dangerous. Perhaps the most unique aspect of Verruckt was the fact that the team could start separated. If players spawned on opposite sides of the map, they were forced to fight through multiple rooms before finally meeting each other. This mechanic may seem simple today, but at the time it was a terrifying experience. Communication became essential as players attempted to survive on their own while coordinating a route toward the center of the map. For many players, this was the first time Zombies felt like a true cooperative experience rather than a simple survival mode with other players. Adding to the fear factor were the sounds of the asylum itself. Throughout the match, players could hear distant screams, cries, and laughs, and other unsettling noises echoing through the halls. These sounds served no gameplay purposes but were rather incredibly effective at creating a horrifying atmosphere. Treyarch understood that horror is often more effective when it is psychological. The player was constantly reminded that something was wrong with this place even when no zombies were nearby. This map also introduced electrical traps, another feature that would become a staple of Zombies for years to come. By activating these traps, players could create temporary barriers of electricity that instantly killed zombies attempting to pass through. While useful, the traps came with a cost and required careful timing. This encouraged players to think strategically about resource management rather than simply relying on weapons alone. Verruckt was one of the first maps to feature the mystery box in a much larger and more meaningful way. The mystery box could simply disappear and move to another location, requiring players to move through the map and search for the mystery box to grab a more powerful weapon in hopes of increasing their chances of survival. Since the zombies became more difficult with each round, acquiring strong weapons became less of a luxury and more of a necessity. However, what truly made Verruckt memorable was its atmosphere. Even years later, many players remember the map less for its gameplay elements and more for the fear it created. The dark hallways, flickering lights, abandoned medical equipment, and disturbing audio design combined to create one of the most unsettling environments in all of Zombies. Unlike modern Zombies maps that focused on grand storylines and complex Easter eggs, Verruckt relied on simplicity. It wanted players to feel vulnerable and afraid. The vulnerability was reinforced by the introduction of the zombie sprinting mechanic. In Nocturne Totem, players could simply recover from mistakes as the zombies were slower and moved at a manageable pace. In Verruckt, a simple mistake could end an entire game. Being trapped in a corner or hesitating for even a moment could result in immediate death. As a result, every round felt intense, and even if the player could get to round 5 or round 25, it was a constant amount of pressure put on through each round. Another important addition was the inclusion of the first radios and hidden ciphers around the map. While primitive compared to the elaborate storytelling found in later titles, these radios offered a glimpse into the world of zombies. They hinted at experiments, scientific research, and events that had taken place before the zombies. At the time, most players simply overlooked this, but they would eventually become the foundation for one of zombies' most recognizable and easy to follow narratives of the Ether storyline. Looking back today, it is easy to underestimate just how revolutionary Verruckt was. Many of its features have become so common within zombies, the players would simply expect them to be there. Perks, power switches, traps, environmental storytelling, split spawns, and a greater emphasis on teamwork all originated or were heavily expanded upon within this single map. Without Verruckt, it is difficult to imagine zombies evolving into the massive mode the fans know today. What makes the map truly special is that every mechanic served a purpose. The perks made players stronger but required them to take risk. The power switch provided an objective while forcing players deeper into the map. The map layout created tension and rewarded teamwork. Every addition worked together to make survival feel both challenging and rewarding. In many ways, Verruckt represents Treyarch's realization that zombies could be more than a hidden bonus mode. Nocturne and Totem proved that players enjoy this concept, but Verruckt demonstrated that the formula could evolve. It showed that zombies had room for progression, strategy, and atmosphere on a much larger scale. The map laid the foundation for nearly every innovation that followed. Even after countless maps, multiple game releases, and years of evolution, Verruckt remains one of the most respected maps in all of zombies. Not because it has the biggest Easter egg or the most complicated quests, but because it simply understood what zombies were supposed to be. It was chaotic, terrifying, unpredictable, and unmatched. Every match felt like a desperate fight for survival, and every round felt earned. For many players, Verruckt was the first map that genuinely scared them. It transformed zombies from an interesting side mode into an experience capable of creating tension, excitement, and unforgettable moments. More importantly, it established many of the mechanics and design philosophies that continue to define quality zombies to this day.